Hi again, Pastor Walt. This is video number 12, so this means we've been at this for 6 months now. So I need to ask, how are you doing spiritually? There are 3 different resources that we have been encouraging you to use for personal spiritual growth. John Bailey's A Diary of Private Prayer, John DeVries' Why Pray, and of course the Lectio Divina process, whereby you're encouraged to focus on, reflect on, and meditate on a certain portion of Scripture to see how Jesus might want to shape and mold and form you to become more and more like Him. Just over a week ago, I returned from a dental mission trip in Oaxaca, Mexico. Of course, I took John Bailey along with me. And in the morning, before we went to clinic, I would pray his prayer for that morning and try to take it to heart. But then I also got led to take Bailey with me to the clinic. Several times a day, I could sneak off for some quiet moments to refocus once again on that prayer. It amazed me how Jesus would use that prayer when prayed several times a day to draw me closer and to take me deeper in relationship with Himself. Jesus does all the most important work whenever we meet with Him in solitude, but personal spiritual growth requires that we be intentional about prioritizing the solitude time with Jesus so that He can draw us closer and take us deeper in relationship. So this video, I'd like to point you back to day 7, John DeVries' Why Pray. This one is entitled Prayer is Work. John begins, this is on page 53. Haddon Robinson first called my attention to prayer as work by asking the question, where did Jesus do the work of the atonement? In the garden, in the judgment hall, or on the cross? Robinson said that in his estimation, the real work of the atonement came when Christ sweat drops like blood, agonizing in prayer in the garden. Because Christ did the work of prayer, He could enter Pilate's judgment hall with a quiet confidence. And on the cross, He could say, Father, forgive them. However, because the disciples failed at the work of prayer in the garden, they deserted Jesus when He was arrested, leaving Him to face His trial and to hang alone on the cross. Prayer is our working relationship with God. In His estimation, and I'd think about this one for a while, in His estimation, the real work of the atonement happened in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's very true of Jesus that most often before major events in His life or His ministry, He would go off in solitude with the Father. For instance, before the day He chose the 12, He went off alone. Luke said He spent all night long in prayer to the Father. Second, even after that event of incredible multitude, the feeding of the 5,000, right afterward, He sent the disciples off alone, and He went off in solitude with the Father. And of course, here He was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it enabled Him to have the courage and the strength to face the mission of His life, His cross, with a quiet confidence and even with forgiveness in His heart. Prayer is our working relationship with God. Every praying Christian must understand that his or her prayers are not merely support for various missions, they are the real work of mission. When done properly, they make it possible for the missionary to perform the mop-up operation. Wesley Duell, a former missionary to India and a teacher of prayer, tells how his mission struggled for 25 years as it planted one new church each year. The missionaries decided that something was wrong, so they enlisted 1,000 people in their sending countries to pray daily. In the next few years, the mission exploded from 25 to more than 550 churches, and from 2,000 to nearly 75,000 believers. God intends for prayer to be the means by which we join Him in His work of redeeming the world. I love the way John says that. God intends for prayer to be the means by which we join with Him in His work of redeeming the world. And then John would say, I think of prayer as a spotlight. When I pray for a specific area, I'm calling God's attention to that target, focusing His spotlight on that area in a special way, illuminating the places of spiritual darkness and death. when I go prayer walking, interceding quietly for each house that I pass, I focus the light of God's love on that home, and I believe it's an extremely significant act. Something happens in that home, even though I may not see it. When I focus the light of God's love, even momentarily on a house, by praying for its occupants, something significant happens. I think instead of sending you a video in the next 2 weeks, I hope to see many of you at Concordia, Missouri. I'm going to be there on Wednesday of CMI. I hope to have a chance to visit personally with many of you. I'll see you then. Lord bless and keep you. Take care.